This is a Course in Miracles. It is a required course. Only the time you take it is voluntary. Free will does not mean that you can establish the curriculum. It means only that you can elect what you want to take at a given time. The course does not aim at teaching the meaning of love, for that is beyond what can be taught. It does aim, however, at removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence, which is your natural inheritance. The opposite of love is fear, but what is all-encompassing can have no opposite. This course can therefore be summed up very simply in this way. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. Okay. This is part 2 of Chapter 15, The Holy Instant. This is Section 7, The Needless Sacrifice. We're beginning at the end of paragraph 7 to lead into paragraph 8. And if you missed part 1, please go look for that so you can hear our discussion on paragraphs 1 through 7.
It is only by attack without forgiveness that the ego can ensure the guilt that holds all its relationships together. And that was something we said just briefly, that means, to me it means that egos want to have stuff on another person. It's
Yes.
a spontaneous way that we relate. I build myself up, I have stuff on them, and it gets rarefied into very, very corrupt relationships at high levels. But on a day-to-day basis, that's the way we function. Yet they only seem to be together. For relationships to the ego mean only that bodies are together. It is always this that the ego demands, and it does not object where the mind goes or what it thinks, for this seems unimportant. As long as the body is there to receive its sacrifice, it is content. To the ego, the mind is private, and only the body can be shared. Ideas are basically of no concern, except as they bring the body of another closer or farther. And it is in these terms that it evaluates ideas as good or bad. What makes another guilty and holds him through guilt is good. What releases him from guilt is bad, because he would no longer believe that bodies communicate, and so he would be gone. And those are in quotes. The word "gone" is in quotes.
Well, it's comparing bodies with ideas versus ideas in this particular paragraph. It's saying that the ego can only think that there's relationships between bodies. That's the only way it knows relationships, and it's going to go through this whole that I sacrifice myself, or as long as the body is there to receive its sacrifice, it is content. To the ego, the mind is private, and only the body can be shared. So it's definitely not the true sharing at all, because bodies cannot share. They don't share. Even though they communicate with one another and everything else, it's only ideas which lose nothing when they're shared, that are shared.
I know that's what the Course says.
But
and I know that's the teaching of the Course.
It's to just bring it back to the terminology. I like to review some of the terminology, that the idea of sharing means that neither one nor the other ever loses anything. Whereas in an egoic relationship, there's always getting and losing. There's a sense of sacrifice, or that I'm getting something. That's how it uses relationship, the egoic body sense.
Well, if I go back to my entire life, I don't know that I think every relationship I've ever had, whether it was when I was playing basketball in high school or whatever in college a little bit, and women or friends, it's always been bodies.
Yes.
If I'm really honest about it, it's always been bodies.
Mm-hmm. And yet, of all people I know, you love to share ideas. And it doesn't mean that you're on the phone or something else. There's no body that's there. But I mean, obviously there's a body at the other end of the telephone or whatever. But you're a person who likes to share ideas.
No,
almost
I
almost
like
and then you like to share people's presence.
But then again, do I just view other people as ears?
Oh, well,
You know,
that's true.
repositories for my ideas that, and that I judge the person for whether I think it's landing or not.
Oh, well, that's true. Yes.
So I'd say that even though I'm definitely a lot in my head, as you would say, I'm more of a head tripper than experiential. Even at that, I think that if I really check in with myself, this is the deal that I understand, is that as with the sonship, as with an environment, as with the holy instant in all other general applications of the idea, I tend to view my world as out there, and I'm the only thing in here. So I'm always private. There's nothing I can do about that.
Right.
My ideas, I can advertise them to the world, but as far as I know, I'm talking to a dog or a cat. I don't know who's hearing what.
Okay.
Right? I don't know what anybody's getting, because I'm the only subject in this world. I'm the only subject. I can say, oh no, there's a lot of people. Then they have no. It's structurally, I am the only subject in my world. It's structural. I am the only thing in my whole world that says I am. My couch doesn't say I am.
Right.
You don't say I am. The cat doesn't say I am.
When I say I am, I'm talking about my individual self, not yours.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
I have to build that. I have to build that idea that you are a conscious I am presence of some sort. I have to build it, and it's artificial. So once again, it's an idea that I have built. It's not my experience of you. And so that all relationships are based on bodies, all of them. And because of that, so we're in this, as we said last time, prison planet, based on the structure of it. If I want to view you as me, I have to call in spirit. I have to call in the Holy Spirit if I want to view you as me. If I want to somehow view your...
Or even know yourself.
It's a feeling. Okay, like if I go back...
I mean, don't you think? I mean, to know me is to know yourself. I mean, the me that you're talking about, not the body-centric thing, but the one that is universal, that is the same in all things.
Yes. But again, in terms of accumulating data or knowledge about myself or what I am, if I go back to that, religious experience, spiritual experience I had in Sarasota, Florida, so long ago, and I use that because it was relatively dramatic. It was the first time I ever had anything like that, because I've been practicing, and I've had a few instances that are similar, but definitely that was dramatic. And in that dramatic moment, I was in this church, and I did receive communion, Holy Communion in the Catholic Church from the Eucharistic minister, a guy that had a lot of judgment about it. I didn't like the way he looked, et cetera, et cetera. But I know that when I looked him in the face at that moment, and I was in the middle of that process that I'll call a holy instant, I think it was. When I was in that process, I had a sense of him being connected to a knowing that knew me.
Yes. Yes.
I did not know him at all. But what I knew of him was his knowledge of me, if I could say it that way.
I understand that.
And so that was very humbling. And it was, that knowledge wasn't a stripping to where I felt exposed. It was a welcoming knowledge. So I felt welcomed by this guy that, minutes before I had judgments about. But he was also connected to everyone else. Though he remained an individual, he was also connected to generally a consciousness that included the whole room.
Right.
So that's why I'm saying that I think that there's a reversal of the subject-object relationship in terms of trying to understand what this is saying in relationships. In other words, I'm in a relationship with you. As long as I stay embedded in my head, in my body, in your body, and I stay here and I sort out and I have forgiveness moments and I have attack moments and I bury the hatchet and I do whatever I do. True forgiveness is not there. Forgiveness is when I grant you that consciousness, that I really don't know myself, and that I really am in a fresh and new situation here with you.
Yes.
Fresh and new.
Right.
And how? Because, and you're not going to tell me about it because you're as, let's say, dumb as I am. But the thing is, through the gesture to the Holy Spirit of asking for a reinterpretation, who are you? Who am I?
Right.
What's going on here? Who is she? Why is she here? What's going on with this? And in that moment, the Holy Spirit then comes in and goes, well, actually, you are in a large world of
Right.
which she is a kind of a face on that large world. And this is what we see, the large world. And she becomes the face for that large world. Does that make sense?
And then the knowledge of who you are dawns on yourself as well, doesn't it? I mean, in other words, if like the Eucharistic minister who you recognize knows you in a very intimate and loving way, there's a sense of if you're honest about yourself, because I've experienced those things too, then there's also, then I must be the thing that he knows. And I mean,
and that's a good way to say it. I'm the thing that he knows. In
Yes.
other words, I don't know myself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Something else knows me.
Yeah.
And it's a reassuring knowledge that I'm not supposed to know that. I'm not supposed to. It's not like I feel limited.
No.
So all I'm saying is that all this stuff that it's talking about is not about the shell game of egoic relationships and fixing them or solving them in any sense of the word.
Right. Right. I don't know if we covered the fact that again, this particular paragraph begins to separate out that the ego views its world through bodies interacting with one another and everything else.
And we have to understand ourselves as ideas.
Yes.
I'm an idea,
Yeah.
God is an idea.
Yes, and that's the distinction. To the ego, the mind is private and only the body can be shared. Ideas are basically of no concern. Like, it doesn't care about ideas, except as they bring the body of another closer or farther. And it is in these terms that it evaluates ideas as good or bad. What makes another guilty and holds him through guilt is good, and what releases him from guilt is bad, because he would no longer believe that bodies communicate, and so he, the ego, would be on. So it doesn't want that situation. It wants to make sure that it stays in this idea of guilt and sacrifice, throughout its existence in, quote, relationship from one body to the next.
Right.
So let's go on and see where ideas and bodies are different again. Okay, paragraph 9. Suffering and sacrifice are the gifts with which the ego would bless all unions. Suffering and sacrifice, people. It seems like crazy, but okay, suffering and sacrifice are the gifts with which the ego would bless all unions, and those who are united at its altar accept suffering and sacrifice as the price of union. In their angry alliances, born of the fear of loneliness, and yet dedicated to the continuance of loneliness, each seeks relief from guilt by increasing it in the other. Wow. Just to say that again. And those who are united in its altar accept suffering and sacrifice, as the price of union. In their angry alliances, born of the fear of loneliness, and yet dedicated to the continuance of loneliness, each seeks relief from guilt by increasing it in the other. For each believes that this decreases guilt in him. The other seems always to be attacking and wounding him, perhaps in little ways, perhaps, quote, unconsciously, yet never without demand of sacrifice. The fury of those joined at the ego's altar far exceeds your awareness of it. For what the ego really wants, you do not realize.
Now, you say, like, this is a surprise, I can't believe this is happening. Like, but if you really check most relationships, there's a price. And the price is, okay.
No, if I really go deep into it, I mean, even in all my other relationships and everything else, I would say for sure this is played out a lot of times in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe
and continually.
to a greater or lesser degree, or more obvious or not degree, in every single relationship, there is the exchange that happens, the clasp, the agreement.
Mm-hmm.
I have given this, you have accepted.
Mm-hmm.
You have given this, I have accepted, and we strike that deal.
Right. And what I give, I sacrifice, and then you get.
Well, no, the giving is, it's as it said. In this case, the giving is giving it away.
Yes.
My loss.
Oh, yes. Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. My loss, meaning I sacrificed.
Yeah.
You know.
But we do it in every relationship, and it's got to be understood that this is talking generally about every relationship with everybody everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No one escapes this unless you are pursuing the holy relationship, which is a unique transcendence of the physical situation.
Yes. Yes.
Now, I'm going to say that you can get to a point to where the holy relationship, you can start to realize, okay, I've got anger, I've got a shell game going in that relationship, I have petty irritations, whatever it is, or I have a sense of, I don't know if I really want to do this, or a sense of boredom, whatever it is I've got going on with it. I can recognize that I am in the egoic relationship, and with or without the holy instant per se, I can at least not take that relationship to heart.
Right.
I can realize I am playing a game, and if I don't want to take the time to soften the gaze and to go through actually generating the perceptual shift, I would say that you get some of the distance there by simply understanding the game the ego's playing and calling it on.
Because awareness is the first step to, so that in the future, whether or not you use it in that particular instant, you can decide to call on the Holy Spirit to have it reinterpreted. And there in this one also, it was there was in their angry alliances, born of the fear of loneliness and yet dedicated to the continuance of loneliness. Each seeks relief from guilt by increasing it in the other. I think it's interesting, again, it uses really, really strong language of angry alliances, born of fear of loneliness. And, particularly my early relationships with men and stuff like that, my fear of loneliness was a lot, not suddenly or always thinking they're going to go away. And then, a lot of them did and stuff like that. But I mean, it was born of that. I wouldn't have thought it was an angry alliance. Pitiful, maybe, but not angry. Anyway, it's just kind of interesting to reflect on, relationships from an egoic, personal, personality with another personality, and realizing that these kinds of things have played out in my life in that way.
Yeah, anyway. Right. Okay, paragraph 10. Whenever you are angry, you can be sure that you have formed a special relationship which the ego has blessed, for anger is its blessing. Anger takes many forms, but it cannot long deceive those who will learn that love brings no guilt at all, and what brings guilt cannot be love and must be anger. All anger is nothing more than an attempt to make someone feel guilty, and this attempt is the only basis the ego accepts for special relationships. Guilt is the only need the ego has, and as long as you identify with it, guilt will remain attractive to you. Yet remember this, to be with a body is not communication. And if you think it is, you will feel guilty about communication and will be afraid to hear the Holy Spirit, recognizing in His voice your own need to communicate. I think, once again, I know that we've done it several times, we've got to get into this material that seems counterintuitive. I don't, whenever you are angry, you can be sure that you have, I'm blessing a relationship with my anger. That we've got to understand that to some extent. How am I blessing a relationship with my anger? I'm blessing it with my anger.
And because later on it says, anger takes many forms, but it cannot long deceive those who will learn that love brings no guilt at all. And what brings guilt cannot be love and must be anger. All anger is nothing more than an attempt to make someone feel guilty. And this attempt is the only basis the ego accepts for special relationships. So the blessing for anger is its blessing. The blessing is to bless the other person with being guilty or themselves guilty. I mean, it's just...
No, we're talking about a sacred ritual in the egoic terms. It's
right.
A sacred ritual. It's using the term blessing because that has to do with altars and idols on altars and things like that. So when I'm in a relationship and I feel, by the way, this isn't a real natural thought process.
Right.
I mean, I'm trying to think my way through this thing because, as I said before, the last thing in the world the ego wants to have happen is for its cover to be blown on the way that it relates to other egos and people. We want to feel like we're mostly okay, except for those few exceptions.
Good people.
Right. So the anger that blesses a relationship is any form of sacrifice or irritation that I feel. I would have to say, what relationship have I ever had that did not involve some sense of sacrifice or irritation? I'm going to say that let's say a first girlfriend. I'm just saying, and I'm infatuated, and so and this is back in college, first girlfriend. There's no sense of sacrifice. I'm jumping into that thing full force. Now, it doesn't take long for the sacrifice aspect to reveal itself, but on the front end, I feel like it's all my gain. I feel like I'm all completely gaining. That's called being in love. And if both people share that, then they are in love, right? So where in that, I'm going to say that the anger in that situation is a little bit like pumping water into a water tower. You've got no flowing water, but by God, there's a moment where you open the tap and you got, 100 pounds per square inch coming down. So they demand,
a child.
The child dictates what you're going to do.
Yes.
If you're listening, as people say, if you really, I've heard it said this way, and I believe it, it's, being a parent will either turn you into a criminal or a saint. And the criminal is where you say, hey, I got my space, I'm going to get my needs met, at the sacrifice of the child. Or the saint is, okay, well, I don't have any needs anymore. They might, but they're all on a shelf. But along the way, there's a situation of, in that situation, I didn't have a holy instant, I didn't have a meltdown or something like that. But I did have the one word, I'm going to bring it up even though it's out of the scope of this, the dharma. I got the word dharma, D-H-A-R-M-A, Vedic term meaning law or duty or your position in life, or the truth, or it's a form of truth. And when I realized that this is my dharma, it's impersonal. She doesn't owe me anything, and I owe her everything that I can bring to the relationship. And so it's just a matter of me enlarging what my sense of what I can offer in the relationship is in terms of what is the dharma of a father. What is the dharma of a teacher? What's the dharma of someone who is, I don't know, pretending rocks are coins in the park?
Right. So that's what I mean, because that's where it's talking about that kind of anger that comes up. And I thought,
Oh, no, in terms of the cachet, that's what I'm saying is in terms of these special love relationships, the special relationships, yes, murderous rage when I go into it with a certain deal, like I gave,
Yeah.
and then you get nothing back,
Right.
Then you want to kill.
Yes.
I mean, a situation that was actually happening in an ashram was that it was a spiritual couple were running the ashram, and she got sick of the whole thing for whatever reason. There's some cultural things going on here, but anyway, so she got sick of it, and she had a boyfriend. Well, this guy went and stabbed her to death, killed the other guy.
Oh my God.
And then he killed himself. This is a spiritual relationship. So it was quite the thing. It shook up a lot of people because they were so spiritual. They really were. They were so spiritual and loving.
And then yet remember this, to be with a body is not communication. And if you think it is, you will feel guilty about communication and will be afraid to hear the Holy Spirit, recognizing his voice, your own need to communicate, recognizing in his voice your own need to communicate. So now we're going to get into the Holy Spirit's, how we really want to communicate, and that the Holy Spirit is right there for us to learn what that desire is for that communication is love. So paragraph 11, the Holy Spirit cannot teach through fear. And how can he communicate with you while you believe that to communicate is to make yourself alone? It is clearly insane to believe that by communicating you will be abandoned. And yet many do believe it, for they think their minds must be kept private or they will lose them. But if their bodies are together, their minds remain their own. The union of bodies thus becomes the way in which they would keep minds apart. For bodies cannot forgive. They can only do as the mind directs. So again, the communication is with that the Holy Spirit is going to teach. It doesn't teach through fear. He's going to teach through love, and so long as we believe that that somehow I can keep private thoughts and things like that, I will feel as though I don't want the Holy Spirit's answer. In other words, what do you mean? All my communication is going to be with the other person and everything else. But the idea, those thoughts are not necessarily the thoughts that the Holy Spirit is talking about. The thoughts that are in the mind of the Holy Spirit are thoughts that are shared, that everyone wants. They're thoughts that experience a sense of love. They are thoughts that bring absolute peace. They are thoughts that raise up in ebullient joy, that ebullient joy. So we think that what they're asking for is to share like all my private thoughts. No, it's saying that because I want to keep things private, because I think that I'll lose something by sharing. That is the thing that prevents me from experiencing the communication that the Holy Spirit would like to have me to have. The idea that I can keep private thoughts and keep my private body and things like that are the thoughts that keep me from desiring what the Holy Spirit has for me. That's what I feel that particular paragraph is about.
Yes. The Holy Spirit cannot teach through fear. So, in other words, there's no holy instant, there's no miracle, there's no holy relationship as long as there's fear. And that fear is that if I'm afraid that I have a holy instant, if I'm afraid of going through this process that this course is describing, if I'm afraid that if I do this, I will, in a sense, lose my mind. Mm-hmm. I'll lose more of my orientation. I'll lose all my relationships. I'll lose everything. And the Holy Spirit can't teach through that. It can't. There has to be, and it says it's for while you believe that to communicate is to make yourself alone, it is clearly insane to believe that by communicating you will be abandoned.
Right.
So that there's a quality to this. If I go, it's what stops. I'd say it's one of the things that stops any spiritual process from coming to completion or fruition. It draws up short because I sense that things are going to really change. I sense that my mind will change its private quality.
Right.
That there's and the ego is going to.
And it's as if you'll lose your personal autonomy or your personal world if abandoning my private thoughts. It's like, what does that mean? There's this. Everybody has places that they go, I don't really want to ever share that particular thing. Maybe that's.
Well, there's this Buckminster Fuller.
There's things that people are very private about.
Right. Well, there's this thing Buckminster Fuller calls tensegrity, and there's certain hard objects, and then certain strings. So this object is made out of a unit.
Let's see. This is like a basketball. It just bounces.
Oh, yeah.
Now, it distributes all its loads. You're seeing a lot of sticks, and the sticks, no stick touches another. The sticks are like the bricks. They're held together simply by what you call Dacron thread, which we use for cleaning our teeth. But no thread is slack. Everything is all pulling. So when I drop it like that, it distributes the load through the whole thing. It's like a basketball. It's exactly like a basketball. Put air into a basketball, pump it in, and it gets hotter and hotter. It gets a little hot. But the molecules of atmosphere you're putting in of air do not go to the center and explode outwardly like that and be vibrating like that. What they do is go in and go caroming around. They're trying to get out, so they hit the skin here and then keep bouncing around.
So I think that our relationships are built out of this. Egoic relationships are built in sort of a tensegrity. Some of it is sort of like in tension, and some of it's in compression. We're in this this situation where parts of me are compressed, parts of me are extended out. And so that when you pull on one of those things, as with this Buckminster Fuller dome, the whole thing collapses. If our big chunks of it just cave in, because it's an interrelationship of these rigid parts and these tense parts, tension. So that, in other words, the Holy Spirit is saying, quit the relaxation and quit carrying your cross. Carrying your cross is carrying the burden of being compressed and burdened by time.
Right.
And it says, give up the compression, give up the tension, give up the tension. And of course, if you lose your tensegrity, you lose your dome, you lose your geometry, and it falls apart. So I think that rather than just saying, I'm afraid of communicating, I'm afraid of this and this and this, I actually function on a moment-to-moment basis, recognizing that I have built a world out of a lot of prejudices and ideas and dependencies and strength moments. It's built out of that. And if I start challenging that with this spiritual relationship thing, the whole thing will collapse. And I think that's what I started off saying. I think that's some of the reason that this is saying the Holy Spirit cannot teach through fear. That seems like a counterintuitive. Why would it lead off with this? Who's asking the Holy Spirit to teach me through fear? And the Holy Spirit is just giving me a red flag. I don't care what you ask for, and I don't care where you want to go. Me, speaking as the Holy Spirit, I can't get through your fear of abandonment. I can't get through your fear of abandonment. You have, if I have a fear of abandonment, then I have to start there. Right. I have to start there, but don't expect to get a holy instant based on fear and fear of abandonment.
Right.
Does that?
Yes, absolutely. It can't communicate there. It has to have an invitation, and the invitation has to be free of fear. And even if it's a very little moment of free of fear, it can use that. Because sometimes we're tepid or whatever. We're having this little I think I can, and then You have a relaxation. In that moment of relaxation, even if it's a short one, where the fear is subsided, if your intention is that you really want to see something different, or you really want to know the holy instant, it can use that. So, I mean, it doesn't ask us to approach everything with no fear, because when you start to practice all of this, fears do come up. It's just natural that there's certain aspects you go, oh yeah, I'm getting. And then there's like, I don't know, I don't think I want to. It seems like that's asking an awful lot of me, which is the ego, trying to keep its solidity of its own body-centered being. And but even it's called a holy instant because it's an instant where you relinquish your ideas on things and say that you want to see something differently so that the communication can now begin to flow through. Anyway, the union of bodies thus becomes the way in which they would keep minds apart. So the bodies won't communicate. It's just not how it works.
Paragraph 12. The illusion of the autonomy of the body and its ability to overcome loneliness is but the working of the ego's plan to establish its own autonomy. As long as you believe that to be with a body is companionship, you will be compelled to attempt to keep your brother in his body, held there by guilt. And you will see safety in guilt and danger in communication. For the ego will always teach that loneliness is solved by guilt, and that communication is the cause of loneliness. And despite the evident insanity of this lesson, many have learned it. Again, I don't know, man, it's talking about everyday experiences. It's talking about every relationship we've ever had, and I'm having a hard time finding it. The illusion of the autonomy of the body. Now, I understand that. And you go into the sort of the yoga process of looking at the body as being a bunch of processes in here, and the mind of being these things in my brain that are wiggling around. So I've got all these, as I said, noodles, basically peristaltic actions or thought pulsations and stuff like that. And it's all in me. It seems to be contained right here in this container. And the Course is saying if I have a fear of that opening out and finding that that's not the case, then there's going to be a fear, and it can't really reach through that. Loneliness solved by guilt. How would I solve loneliness by guilt? So if I use that word guilt again, if I return back to the prior stuff I've said several times, of guilt being an arbitrary bar, that I either exceed or I fall short of, and then I measure success or failure, guilt, based on limits. Guilt, limitations and a limited. In other words, I'm not in the sonship. I'm not a son of God.
Right.
I'm a limited chunk that's broken off, isolated and alone. So how would guilt, if I am an isolated chunk, how does guilt fix it? Maybe guilt.
As far as loneliness is concerned?
Well, I know that there's people that unite under the banner of victimization and loneliness. They unite under loneliness. And that becomes a sort of a tent that they gather under.
Right.
Is it talking about that?
Well, again, you use the word limit, but with guilt, I use a sense of separation and lack. So because I'm bound together with another in this guilt through my sense that I'm lacking and the other person is lacking in something. And so we come together to fulfill those different lacks in each other, however it looks. Some of them are very dysfunctional, some of them function quite well. So because of that, it's a puzzle piece where one person has a hole one place and the other person has this other thing, and it seems as though if the relationship is good, it fits well, and therefore I feel whole, at least for a little while. That's your good.
I don't know if this story, I don't know if this is going to help any. I feel the need to bail into some sort of an illustration. But we moved to Memphis, Tennessee, and I went out for the basketball team, and it was kind of like a cold turkey move to go out for basketball in the 9th grade. And I didn't know anybody on the team. I didn't know anybody there. Everything was strange to me in Memphis from Illinois. And I felt very isolated, very alone, very vulnerable, and, I don't know what, scared, I guess.
Yes.
And so I identified somebody that I thought had problems that was on the basketball team. And I thought, this will be a good friend, because I can trade my... I do have a certain amount of self-image, and I can trade that for this guy's obvious problem because his eyes were going off in different directions, and he just looked like a very, very frail person, and his eyes were all kind of cockeyed. What I didn't realize was he had not always been that way. He had been through an eye operation, and that he had dissipated his, but he was on the basketball team. In other words, he is a very confident and cocky guy. I just happened to find him at a bad moment. And so I was kind of like...
I can't imagine how this goes.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
So I kind of say to the guy, we were running, and I said, wow, you guys run hard. We were doing ladders or something, as the conditioning drills at the end of practice. And he goes, why don't you quit? And I go... No, you don't understand me. This is what I wanted to say to him. You don't understand me. You're this screwed up person that needs me as a friend because I'm better than you. This is if I came right out and said it. I would say, do you understand? You are the lesser between us. The only reason I'm reaching out to you is because, if I put words on it. If I put words on it. And he just kept saying, every time I would say something to him about something, trying to bond with him in my sense of victimization of being strange and alone and all that, he would just say, why don't you quit? And it just went on that way. And I didn't realize that he and all of his friends kind of hated me because I was from out of town and I'm this new guy and that I was looking for love in all the wrong places. But anyway, I'm just saying, I think that there might be
that's
something...
what I'm talking about, the lack thing, feeling of lack.
I know it's kind of obscene. It's so on the surface.
No, it's a good one. It's a good example, though, because, it shows up in all those different places. That's where we think that we're reaching out to communicate, but we're really just want somebody else to take on the guilt and for one of us to either be better or, while we're feeling little, we want to feel better.
Well, that's one where I can just definitely see how I can solve my loneliness through guilt, and that communication is a cause of loneliness. I can't come right out and tell the guy what I'm really feeling about things.
Right.
And if I try
that's why I said it's a good example.
Yeah.
Paragraph 13. Forgiveness lies in communication as surely as damnation lies in guilt. It is the Holy Spirit's teaching function to instruct those who believe communication to be damnation that communication is salvation, and he will do so for the power of God in him and you is joined in a real relationship so holy and so strong that it can overcome even this without fear.
Let me go back to this guy.
Okay.
His name was Richard.
Okay. We're going to talk about forgiveness and the communication.
Well, I'm just saying. I'm saying, how would that have functioned for me? How would the Course in Miracles have brought a healing into that situation?
Okay.
It would have been, I'm in this, it feels isolated and it feels alone. I would not have tried to bond on the basis of that by identifying what I thought was a weak link, which then was a projection of my own weakness. And I wouldn't have tried that strategy, which, now the thing is, if I look at it in terms of the Holy Spirit, I chose correctly, right? Because the guy kicked me out of that immediately. It didn't work.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So the Holy Spirit was smiling on me.
Yeah.
So in a sense, you could say I did have a holy relationship there. It did, but it wasn't based on me.
No, it reflected back something about yourself.
Well, what I would say that God or the Holy Spirit did was kicked me out of that one real quick. And instead of hooking me up with somebody who really did feel victimized and then was going to suck the life out of me over the course of my high school experience there, that just went away. In fact, all those guys were antagonists for the next 2 years. So I just dealt with them always wanting to beat me up here and there. Stuff I don't know why. But in any case, if I had been doing the Course in Miracles at that time, I would have been able to stay with that sense of loneliness and vulnerability as being mine, and looking for another interpretation. I would have looked in other places. It might have been in another, let's say, classroom setting. It might have been, some other setting completely, where I received a reflection back, a witness, a friendlier witness of where I really should have gone. Instead, I was kicked out of that one.
Well, the witness would have given you the sense that you were whole instead of lacking something. If it was a holy instant where you could have handed it over, you would have realized that you weren't lacking anything.
Well, what's interesting about just what you said is that what I ended up getting back, which confused me, was I am 6'3.5" or something like that. And I was pretty good basketball-wise. And I was a new guy. And this is in Memphis, and there's this kind of good old boy thing like, hey, let's go out back behind the barn and see who's the better man. I ran into that constantly, and I don't want to prove who's the better man. I just want them to recognize him. Ironically, what I got back, if I had seen it, the harsh reflection I got back was that they considered me a threat.
Oh, right.
They didn't consider me weak. If anything, they considered me too strong. I was too much a presence. I was a threat. So instead of getting a smarmy reflection back, I got an aggressive, reflection back. In other words, I wasn't getting a happy witness, from the Holy Spirit, but it was giving me some truth there.
I'm going to go back to paragraph 13 because we haven't talked about the forgiveness part yet, though. Okay, paragraph 13. Forgiveness lies in communication as surely as damnation lies in guilt. It is the Holy Spirit's teaching function to instruct those who believe communication to be damnation that communication is salvation. And he will do so, for the power of God in him and you is joined in a real relationship so holy and so strong that it can overcome even this without fear. So that is the healing. It's talking about the healing comes through forgiveness. Forgiveness lies in communication as surely as damnation lies in guilt. So without forgiveness, there is, where fear...
You have to go further, though. You have to go further.
Again, we're in that the crucifixion versus the resurrection moment, because forgiveness brings in the resurrection, brings in the recognition of life. Life is now being shared, whereas damnation lies in guilt, where all things are brought to its lowest common denominator. So, in the Holy Spirit, communication is always with love. It's always when in a now space. To me, forgiveness is recognizing that all the things that I thought I was and what I thought the world was isn't true. In other words, all my concerns about who I am, who the other is, and everything else is revealed as it's all one beautiful, wonderful, loving space.
The operative word is revealed.
In
other words, it's not based on a decision.
Right. And so communication that they're talking about here is a revelation also. It's an instant of revealing the truth. So what I'm forgiving is that I'm forgiving the unreality of my world, because why am I concerned about this thing that is temporal, that is, I'm not going to say that it's not going to hit me, that I can live like this, but forgiveness lies in the fact that nothing really happened in this space. In other words, nothing can happen to the truth of who and what I am.
I know, but all of that,
I am unassailable. No, you have to go there because that's where forgiveness is.
I know, but also that has to be from the Holy Spirit, and you have no capacity in you to go there at all.
That's right. It is from the Holy Spirit. It's absolutely from the Holy Spirit.
So,
that's where I was talking about the communication that they're talking about here is true communication, and that is from the Holy Spirit.
Communication is based on ideas.
Yes.
And as an idea, and that's where we get into what is an idea. Mm-hmm. I've thought about that some when I was writing the notes on the other. An idea is, you can only understand an idea in this transcendent space. It's not ideas like we have ideas.
Right. It's not, I come up with this great idea about whatever it is, about some function in my life.
Or ideas that can change, or good ideas versus bad ideas.
Right.
It's an idea is an unassailable, permanent, eternal essence of something. And me as an idea has an eternal essence of some sort. Joanna has an eternal essence as an idea. And God is the comprehensive idea of ideas, So, you can't, we got to get past it. It's limited by the language. What can I say? So communication has to do with ideas.
Right. And then it goes on in the second sentence. It is the Holy Spirit's teaching function to instruct those who believe communication to be damnation, that communication is salvation.
Okay, what does that look like? What does that look like? What does that look like if there's an instruction that communication is damnation? No, you're wrong. Communication is really salvation.
Because the kind of communication that the ego believes in is a communication where all my private thoughts are revealed that I want to keep to myself. It's so. I don't want
that's the damnation.
That's the damnation. So immediately I will be cut off because I think that what I'm sharing are whatever ideas that people don't, let's say I'm addicted to porn or whatever. I don't want anyone to know about that. So I'm going to keep that my little private Idaho.
I don't even want anybody to know I like hush puppies, let's say.
Well, whatever,
Right.
Those kinds of thoughts that we hold treasure as our own little private guilty space. That is what the ego holds on to and keeps itself in damnation and others because it projects it all the time because that's what the body does. And so in that instance, like with the guy on the basketball team, you were basically damning him, to be a lesser being than yourself. And
yes, right.
Even though you had already damned yourself because now I'm the new guy and I don't feel at home.
Right.
So the communication is broken down.
Where does the idea and forgiveness, where in that situation, where's idea and forgiveness? What do you think?
Well, that can only be revealed through the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit would have revealed that really this is your brother.
One thing is, right off top, I'm going to tell you, I wouldn't have reached out to him.
Right.
I mean, to reach out to a guy because he's cockeyed and skinny is not a good reason to reach out to somebody.
Right. So you already had a prejudgment.
Right.
About who you think this being is and all that kind of stuff. So if you had the course and understood it or whatever, you would have asked to see, you would maybe even use that one, give me your blessing, Holy Son of God, because you want to be able to relax and be able to share something that is as transcendent from a couple of bodies coming together wherever they are. So now it's a moment where you wouldn't see bodies anymore. The bodies are secondary to the communication that takes place when the Holy Spirit descends on a situation.
The knowledge that I'm an idea, let's say as a teaching, let's say a religious or spiritual teaching of this. Mm-hmm. If I was given the idea or the knowledge that I am an idea, and that ideas communicate, and they communicate at this other level. I think it would have given me more consolation so that I wouldn't have been struggling to identify and find footholds in a situation where I saw no footholds. I was just struggling to find social footholds. And I think that I would have been more patient and more accepting. For all I know, I would have gotten a witness from the coach himself,
Right.
or some other teacher or something else. But anyway, I was so busy establishing my own power game because I felt, vulnerable.
Right.
I'm sitting there trying to find footholds and a way to be, that it backfired every time. And I struggled for a very, very long time, constantly trying to find footholds. Never, this is definitely not my skill set of finding myself as an idea, someone, because if there is an idea, you have an essence. That essence is not going to enter into an environment without reason and meaning and purpose. It's you're not going to be in free fall as essence. If I can stay with myself as an idea, that somehow in me, and that God is an idea, and I'm an idea, I think it delivers me in terms of salvation and damnation.
That idea, that holy name, is the same.
Right.
That's the name that is unnamed because it's the same. And that's what's communicated. And that's what is salvation, because you are saved the instant that it dawns on your mind that you're not just a body. You are way beyond that. You recognize your eternal self.
What I'm saying is that there's a holy instant, which is a perceptual shift to where I experience myself as idea, or God as an idea. I experience it. But even prior to that, if I just understand that as information, I think it can bring some consolation and a little bit more skill into a situation, even without a holy instant.
Yeah, I agree. There has to be the desire to see it differently, so that forgiveness is, again, the idea that I forgive myself, I forgive the world for thinking I know everything about it, because you don't. It's impossible to know until the holy instant is available by handing it over.
Okay, 14. It is through the holy instant that what seems impossible is accomplished, making it evident that it is not impossible. In the holy instant, guilt holds no attraction, since communication has been restored, and guilt, whose only purpose is to disrupt communication, has no function here. Here there is no concealment and no private thoughts. The willingness to communicate attracts communication to it and overcomes loneliness completely. There is complete forgiveness here, for there is no desire to exclude anyone from your completion in sudden recognition of the value of his part in it. In the protection of your wholeness, all are invited and made welcome, and you understand that your completion is God's, whose only need is to have you be complete. And you understand that your completion is God's, whose only need is to have you be complete, for your completion makes you His in your awareness. And here it is that you experience yourself as you were created and as you are.
Nice. Yeah.
The book is called A Course in Miracles, and that means a kind of a study program to be able to experience the miraculous. And that's always, I didn't think it could happen, but there it is.
Exactly.
Whether it's an internal, external state, a reflection from the outside, one of the happy witnesses, and that's what this is about. It's not a metaphysical book. It's about finding, I'd say, to strive at some point, somehow, through whatever means in the Course, to experience miracles, to experience the holy instant, and to reconfigure my relationship in the world via a holy instant rather than my struggle against all odds.
Right. And just because I talked about the whole thing with The private thoughts, it says that here there is no concealment and no private thoughts. There's no need to have anything private. And then the willingness to communicate attracts communication to it. So again, with the Holy Spirit, there has to be the willingness. I want to know what this communication is. I am willing. There has to be a want, a desire, a decision. All of those are part of, that's my part in having it be revealed to me. If I'm not willing, if I don't want it, it's not going to be, there will be no miracle. There'll be no recognition.
No, everything will be status quo.
Yeah.
It'll be just like this. Everything will be the same.
And that overcomes loneliness completely. There is complete forgiveness here, and there is no desire to exclude anyone from your completion. Again, it becomes a wholeness. The holy instant restores wholeness to me and to the whole of everything, because all of a sudden you recognize you're not separate. It's all is well. It never got torn apart. There's not a unit. I mean, all things look the same, but the recognition is that it's held together by the same matrix of everything, which is completely lovely. And that's
It's definitely it's a perceptual shift for sure, and that there's no real description of it.
right.
It's
there
an
isn't.
experience.
It has to be experienced. So keep practicing. And that's the end of this chapter. So have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank you.